Peter Iredale wreck has always been a special place for me, for as long as I can remember. This was a favorite place to go camping and clam digging. When I was 12 years old, on my birthday in July, I dug my limit of razor clams, which at that time, a limit was 24 clams. First, the Peter Iredale has withstood over a century of pounding by the surf and erosion of salt in the air. On October 25, 1906, the British sailing ship and steam combination Peter Iredale was en route to Portland, Oregon, to pick up a shipment of wheat in dense fog. The ship's captain, H. Lawrence, wanted to wait until daylight to cross the dangerous Columbia River bar. While waiting for a bar pilot, a dangerous current caught the ship, and suddenly she was hard aground. The captain sent up distress rockets so they could be rescued. All were rescued. The captain lined all the men in a row on the beach and gave them a heartfelt speech, and brought out a bottle of whiskey, and he said, "May her bones bleach white in the sand for all to see. Drink up, gentlemen."
Some of the masts and the rusted off deck beams can still be seen protruding from the sand. These decks were once what men walked on, decisions were made on them, laughter was done here, and also probably there was a good amount of chewing tobacco and spitting it into the sea went on these decks of the Peter Iredale. Now the deck of the Peter Iredale is good for not too much of anything except for seagulls to land on and take a quick break. Although this is one of the big tourist destinations on the coast, and probably in the days of film, Kodak sold many rolls of film of people taking pictures of the wreck of the Peter Iredale. The sun shines through the badly rusted hull of the Peter Iredale, and sea animals make their home on the lower portions of it, because this will be covered by the tide in a little bit. Some years, depending on the ocean current, there will be more of it exposed than there is right now. This year is the least amount I've ever seen exposed of the wreck. At one time, when there was a lot more of it exposed than there is now, I looked down in the front of the hull here, right in the foresail, and I could see a bunch of coal. Apparently the steam engines were fired by coal. But this year, that's all underwater. But still, plenty of barnacles have attached themselves to the hull. I have no idea how much longer the bones of the Peter Iredale will live on, but I always tell people, if you get a chance to do something, do it now, because you never know what tomorrow will bring. Is the Columbia River Bar and the Columbia River. On a nice clear day, you can see boats coming and going out over the Columbia River Bar. At low tide, this is a good place to dig razor clams, although I'm not sure what the season is on them now. I don't think it's open for them right now. The tides come and go as the Peter Iredale sets silently on the beach of Clatsop Spit just off the Columbia River. As the tide comes in, the tourists still are going down and trying to get pictures of it. The stern is sticking up right in the edge of the surf, and then you can look ahead and see the length of the ship, which was quite long. The bones of the old ship shine and reflect into the wet sand and the surf coming up along the beach. We see tourists running to keep out of the water as the waves come in. And there were many tourists coming up out of here with wet feet. The rusty piece of the stern is standing tall above the sand, and it even looks polished smooth from the sand and water running over it day after day, year after year. There's a piece of driftwood sticking out of the sand right ahead of us. I don't know what that's all about. I'm sure it's nothing to do with the Peter Iredale wreck. And the sands keep drifting and polishing the rust of the Peter Iredale day in and day out. After the Peter Iredale, it's time to go check out Battery Russell. This was a gun emplacement to protect the mouth of the Columbia River. Everything is concrete and super thick walls.
That wall there. This is like the generating room.
Oh, this is the generator. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's where they mounted the big generators.
And then in the back, they probably have a boiler or something. But this
yeah.
powered the battery that's up on top. You're going to go see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to build a cement plant on site here to build this thing.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Just think about all the tons of concrete being.
Those steps when I came down.
We've checked out the lower level. Now it's time for us to go up and check out the upper level where the actual gun turrets were. They needed so much concrete to build this place that they had to build a cement plant right here to produce the concrete.
Pacific Rim Peace Memorial, dedicated to members of the 249th Coast Artillery, Oregon National Guard, the 18th Coast Artillery Corps Regiment, Headquarters, Harbor Defenses of the Columbia River, and all other United States personnel stationed at Fort Stevens, Fort Canby, Fort Columbia, CASCU number 1924, and the crew of the Japanese submarine I-25. Near this place, on the night of June 21st, 1942, they faced each other when the Japanese submarine shelled Fort Stevens, making it the first foreign attack on a continental military installation since the War of 1812. That was pretty hard to read when the light was hit.
There are many of these little rooms in the old fort with super thick walls, and I don't know what the purpose was of some of these rooms, and the doors were a very thick steel door, and after the war was over, salvage crews came in and scrapped the place, taking the steel doors and the guns away. I'm not sure what the results would have been had the Japanese submarine that came to the surface far out at sea and started shelling our shoreline. Had it hit Battery Russell, it might have done a lot of damage or it might not have. I don't know how much power those shells had, but it was the I-25 that struck here, and they've even had some of the crew of the I-25 over here from Japan to give talks on coming over here and what their mission was. And anyway, it totally frightened the residents of Astoria, and they thought they'd be out of water and everything, so they filled their bathtubs full of water. And I guess that was the reason for the shelling the place. But the shell fortunately hit nothing. It just killed some beach grass and made a shell crater. Years ago, I visited the site where the shell hit, and there wasn't much of a crater at all left, but there was some shell fragments that hit a shore pine along the edge of it, and the pine was still growing, but deformed a little bit where the shell fragments hit. To hold the big shells up.
You got your pictures?
I'm working on it. Room after room, very small rooms, and I'm not certain what they were used for, but they all had a purpose. And probably during the war, there was a beehive of activity happening here with soldiers going to and fro. And I'm not sure what these pipes were. They surely had a purpose. I just don't know what it was. When I was in the Army in the late 1950s, I was stationed in a military base where they had the Nike Hercules missiles. And I see some similarity to these kind of installations, although ours were quite a bit different. And no one lived in the site itself. There was a separate barracks where you'd live, and then when the alarm would be sounded, you'd hurry up and run up to the base and get these missiles ready to fire. And that was when Khrushchev was in power in Russia. So every time Khrushchev would sneeze, you had to be there and raise those missiles. And our site was all underground with earth covering it. And so it was really tough duty for some of the people that weren't used to roughing it, because the underground thing, so many guys went crazy being underground and the pressure that was on. Now we see the big gun emplacement site where these guns were placed and they could swivel around. The reason they didn't shoot at the I-26, it was the I-25, the Japanese submarine that surfaced out at sea and started firing at the fort, is because it was so far out that they were certain they couldn't hit it, And what's the sense of shooting at something you're not going to be able to hit? Stairway.
Where does it go?
Down where we were. The big ring must be to anchor the big guns. That ring must be to anchor the big guns. This must have been a place to hoist up big shells. And a spot where another big gun must have stood. Now we're up on level 3. And apparently at one time you could see out over the Columbia River before the trees blew up. And grew up. And you could see where your shells were hitting. This is level 3.
Can't believe how much this concrete deteriorated and all that case
From an old picture of Fort Stevens headquarters, here's what some of the big guns must have looked like, and they are big. There are several pictures around with the guns, although none of them were taken here at Battery Russell.